Three.
Welcome everybody to a special edition of Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. There's a stack of comics back there. Today we have special guest Laruen with us, fellow Comic-Con and adventure into all things comic, pop culture, and Star Wars. Lauren's a big Star Wars fan, so I wore my favorite Chewie shirt for tonight's episode.
Nice.
Awesome.
So what we wanted to talk a little bit about today, overall state of Marvel, the MCU specifically. The Marvels is a movie that none of us have really seen as of yet, but we have seen the box office results. Lowest Marvel's ever had, even lower than 2008's The Hulk. So even like adjusted for inflation, the movie is finishing low. I think it had something like a $300 million budget. So it looks like it's a movie Marvel's going to lose money on. We've talked about before on this channel about, is this the death of comic book movies? But today we just want to talk a little bit more about the overall state of Marvel and like if it was up to the three of us, what we would do to try to get them back on track.
One clue that this wasn't going to be a great Marvel movie is when I took all the kids out to see the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, and the Captain Marvel or the Marvels trailer was in that movie, and I was like, man, this the trailer cut looked pretty good, and I was telling one of the other dads, I was telling him, hey, when this one comes out, let's take them to this one, and when we were talking about it, yeah, but none of the kids wanted to see it.
Yeah,
they were just like, no. And it's like, okay, if you can't get a group of comic book teenager fans excited to go see a Marvel movie, like we've been taking our kids to see these Marvel movies for a decade, something's up, right? They just weren't into it.
Yeah, no, I think that what's weird is like, at work, I work with a lot of different people all the time. About 2 years ago when a new Marvel movie came out, that was all anybody was talking about.
Yeah.
And now, I'll come in like an episode of Loki was on and I'm excited to talk about it with anybody. And they're like, oh, I haven't watched it. Marvel's like, when this movie ended, a couple years ago, like when a Marvel film would come out, when you'd come in on Monday after, a lot of people would be talking about the movie.
Everybody at the office, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Now it's more just like, yeah, I didn't catch that one. I'll catch it on Disney Plus when it comes out in a month or two. And I think for me, what I feel like it feels like, and I think I've used this analogy before, but it kind of feels like after Endgame, Marvel is like a video game that you beat and there's no more main plot and you're kind of just running around in the world that's there. Like you can still free play, but there is no more missions or main.
That's a really good analogy. And, it's so sad because we were talking about this in one of our other videos, because the kids love the Spider-Man video game storyline.
Oh, yes.
They really got into that story and all the little side adventures. What do they call them in video games?
Side quests, yeah.
Side quests or whatever, yeah. They were, they spent like weeks like diving into this part of the game and that part of the game. And, it was just like, that what we were talking about is that would have been perfect for like comic book tie-ins, like one of these side adventures, and the comic book could help drive comic book sales. But yeah,
I think that Spider-Man game is kind of an indictment of the MCU a little bit, and it's not that people aren't interested in superheroes anymore. I think that's the thing. You could go, oh well, superheroes are dead. No, when they launch a big video game, it sells. Cartoons for kids still sell. Action figures still sell. I mean, they're making money on us. It's really just the movies. So Laruen on this channel, they probably heard us talk a lot about this. What are your thoughts on where Marvel's at, and kind of if you were put in charge for a day, if you got to be the new Kevin Feige, what would you try to do to get it back on track?
Well, first of all, I would just try to bring back the original characters as they are in the comics. Like I was telling you guys, one of my favorite heroes is Thor, has been for many years. I love the first two movies, and yes, I was actually one of the few people who liked Thor: Dark World. I
liked it too.
And yes, I recognize it has a lot of problems. I'm not saying that, but I was absolutely into the movie, including that, the first of the new Doctor Who's was the main villain, Christopher Eccleston. I was all into the movie. But the thing is it never lost sight of who Thor was. Okay. And I'm not saying that Ragnarok was not an awesome movie. I laughed the whole entire time. But that was the beginning of the end of at least Thor, because he's slowly turning into a character that is absolutely not Thor. My favorite Thor movie is still the first Thor movie, because I mean, for all of its problems too, Kenneth Branagh nailed the feel of Asgard, of Thor, his friends, Loki, all of that. It felt like it jumped off the comics. It felt like it was some kind of Norse mythos and all of that. But of course, Kenneth Branagh, Shakespeare, man, all this other stuff. He knew what he was doing to capture that. Now, yeah, there was problems with it and everything, and most people prefer the humor, but I like everything that when it nails a character. That's why Robert Downey Jr. was perfect for Iron Man. Chris Evans as Captain America. It's whenever you nail the characters that we have loved since the 1960s, and well, even sooner if you count, the golden era. Yeah,
he goes back to the 40s.
Yeah, but I'm just saying his resurgence came in the 60s when they defrosted him, and he merged well into the 1960s and carried on the amazing legend that he is, and it worked. And now, I mean, we are getting a lot of the variants who are comic book characters, but they will never top the original characters. These are the ones that make all the variants work. And when you start going away from who these characters are at their core, you lose the audience. Yeah. Because, I mean, it's one reason why Spider-Man always works. He's always the reckless kid or young adult who still can't figure his way out of the world and everything, whether it's Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield, or Tom.
I will say they did. They're very careful with Spider-Man, but it's not a Marvel. It's
the Marvel Sony problem there.
Yeah, that feels like Sony's protective of it.
Yeah, they kind of put that.
But
they killed Thor. I don't know what Love and Thunder was. What do you think was, you guys? What do you think was the turning point movie when you realized like Marvel really wasn't like the old Marvel movies again?
Ooh.
Love and Thunder was the big one for me.
That was it. But were there clues before? Because
I think Endgame actually was the clue for me. And that while I love Endgame, what they did to Hulk in that movie made me angry. Hulk gets to be like a clown, never gets his shot.
Hulk and Thor.
Yeah,
Hulk
and we don't
and Thor.
We wouldn't like you when you're angry, sir. We wouldn't like you when you're angry.
Thor,
I mean,
Thor became a clown. He was a joke. They had him crying and overweight and used it. And they didn't even do anything with, they didn't even use like the overweight thing to deal with like depression. It was used as jokes. They're talking about cheese whizzes in his blood.
It was.
They didn't even handle that well.
So then that was like your first clue.
There was some seeds in Endgame where I was like, man, those are weird character arcs.
Yeah. For me, I think it was actually Ragnarok.
Some people say it was Ragnarok. Yep.
It was a good movie. And I'm not saying that, but that is when the whole feel of Marvel for me started to shift. To this comedy, really. I mean, Guardians of the Galaxy in many ways was a lot like Ragnarok, but it always was its own entity, its own separate issues. And again, it was still a lot like, in many ways, the comic books and how the characters are. These outrageous, ridiculous characters.
Yeah, it's hard to take a fucking raccoon with a gun too serious.
A raccoon in space. Yeah, you got to.
Yeah, but you got the more humorous side of Thor. He had to be the humorous one because he wasn't really bouncing off of Tony or anybody like that.
I must say, I did not like seeing Thor overweight playing video games.
I didn't either.
Especially because they didn't even deliver an emotional arc on it. They could have done something profound with depression, a warrior that's lost. He's lost his way. Instead, it was just used for cheap jokes.
And to me, it actually kind of even defeated one of the few really good aspects about Ragnarok was the fact that at the end of Ragnarok, Thor finally accepted being king of Asgard, whatever was left of Asgard, of helping his people.
And then he just
But
throws it away.
but he threw it away. I mean, yes, he's going to be sad and everything after Loki, after losing everything. And a lot of that we saw in Infinity War, him dealing with that. But what did we see him do? We saw him build Stormbreaker. We saw him take on the fierce heat of the star. You know, we saw him do all of that and then run off and go bring me Thanos. We saw him overcome it with, you know, with the grandeur of a Norse god. And then we saw him become a stereotypical guy in his parents'
Or, I
basement
mean, they call him
gamer.
like Bro Thor, like even on the
Bro
Funko Pops,
Thor.
they call him Bro Thor.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of defeated the whole king of Asgard that he finally became, or even if it's king of a dying remnant.
Well,
He became
know,
that at the end of Ragnarok, and then that was all gone. And now it's
you could
Valkyries,
do
which who the Valkyrie?
you
I
could
don't
do
know.
that with other characters, maybe, but you just can't get away with it with Thor. I
No,
mean, I know Marvel likes to play, you know, even in the comics, they like to play the role of let's take these, you know, iconic fictional characters and try and make them more relatable, down to earth kind of thing.
mhm.
But you really just can't do that with Thor. I mean,
well, no,
like
it's what
the
makes him
comics,
unique is that he
Yeah.
is so different than humanity. Like you
yeah,
have
Yes.
the human perspective comes from Spider-Man and Captain America and even Iron Man. Thor
yeah,
is supposed to feel different,
yeah.
and
You can't
they
really write them
kind of
like
hit
that.
that.
You
Yeah.
can't get away with Love and Thunder like that. That was like what they did to Flash over in DC.
Oh yeah.
The Love and Thunder. That's why they're both at the bottom of the list,
The
right?
worst of
Mhm.
each. No, no, I think I think we've seen some cracks in Marvel for a while. I think another thing, and I'd be curious to get your guys' thoughts on it. For me, Disney Plus was also a big issue.
Ugh.
I felt like there were issues. Marvel had, in my opinion, the perfect formula for mass market success.
Yeah.
It typically always had one movie in theaters and a preview online or a trailer online
Yeah.
that you were engaged in. So you were talking about the movie that was out and what was to come. Once you threw Disney Plus in, you started having where you got to have people make 6-hour commitments a weekly basis. And where I saw this kind of lose it was my wife would keep up with the Marvel movies. But when something happened on a TV show, she wasn't going to do 6 hours of TV. She's not a comic book nerd. She'll watch a movie for 2 hours on screen, gets the popcorn, enjoys seeing the pretty lights and stuff like that on the screen. Chris Hemsworth on screen, I'm sure, helped her pay attention. But the big thing was it was a good commitment. It was perfect. As soon as you started having things happen, and I remember Doctor Strange was kind of a turning point because my wife had seen most of the movies and we went and saw Doctor Strange and she's like, what happened to Wanda? Like, why is Wanda insane now? Like the last time I
Yeah.
saw her in a movie, she was good and now she's crazy. And I'm like, well, it was a Disney Plus show.
Yeah.
And I think while for us comic book geeks, Disney Plus might be a great thing, I think for the general audience that you need when you're making movies that are $250, $300 million, you got to keep it where it's palatable for them.
Right.
Feel like they kind of lost sight of that. But to me, that's where Disney Plus kind of came in concerning. What are your guys' thoughts about Marvel transitioning to like the Disney Plus kind of era where the shows kind of have a prevalent role?
I got mixed emotions about it. I enjoyed Loki a little bit. The first season, I kind of got into it with the Owen brother. Which one is it?
Owen
It's
Wilson.
Owen Wilson.
Yes.
Yeah, and so I thought that was an interesting angle. I'm not caught up on the new season of it. I'm trying to think of what other Disney Marvel show I liked. Oh, the What If.
Oh
Now,
yes.
that was a good
Good.
show, and that one's coming out again. What other Marvel?
So there was
I
Captain
didn't.
America and the Winter Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Oh, I was so excited for
Mhm.
that. I didn't.
Moon
Uh,
Knight came out. Miss
Moonlight lost
Marvel.
me. I love the Hawkeye Christmas thing.
Oh, I did too.
That one was good.
I think that's been the one certifiably great show they've had.
That was
I think
really
that was really
good.
I I personally I was ecstatic when they first started coming to Disney Plus because I knew they could take bigger risks, and they were. WandaVision was probably one of the greatest risks they took, and I did enjoy it. But I also recognize I love classic sitcoms. I love that. And so the nods to them really kept me going that first time, in that great mystery. You know, how much of it were they actually going to show? Was any of this actually related to Mephisto? The mystery of it really kept me intrigued. The end result, I'm not sure was worth the wait.
It wasn't. It was so strange how they ended that show.
It promised so much.
Yeah.
And then it didn't fully deliver. But at the same time, I didn't exactly hate the experience. And then we had Loki to help balance it out, which was also strange and odd and but absolutely thrilling. You cannot not love anything that Tom Hiddleston is in. The man just he carries anything he is in. Falcon and Winter Soldier, loved. Broke my heart at times and everything, but I loved where it was going with that. You know,
I think they fumbled the ending on the Falcon Winter Soldier thing.
There was some aspects that I loved it. Yeah, it was a little weak ending too, but there was still I think it had a lot more promise, at least, than WandaVision, and the way it ended. Yes. I think it had more promise.
And
because
I'm a huge Falcon fan, and I was so excited to like see him with his wings on and flying and doing all that cool stuff.
And honestly, he's
from when I was a kid in the comics, I loved Falcon.
And honestly, for me, Falcon is one of the few people I think is truly worthy of actually carrying the Captain America mantle outside of Steve Rogers. And even from the comics and the movies perspective, in both range, he's always been a worthy bearer of the shield. Always has been. And so I was really excited when they were going to go with this direction, because I knew Chris Evans was going to retire. So despite the weaker ending, I had a lot of hope for the promise. But slowly over time, I don't know what it was. Maybe Marvel just couldn't handle the split attention between the TV series and the movies. I don't know what it was, but it was like the promise of what Disney Plus was going to offer hasn't really paid off in the end.
Well, I think the part was there was a lot of moments that to me should have been on the big screen. That were awesome. So like the Eternals to me should have been a Disney Plus show. Why?
I could see that.
Why
it Falcon worked that way?
Falcon turning into Captain America, the full suit, him saving the day at the end. That should have been a big screen moment. Instead, you're watching it at 2 a.m. so you don't get spoilers on your cell phone in bed.
Yes.
And it's like that. And to me, I've talked about this before, and we'll talk about Star Wars in another video with Lauren, but like one of the moments I've been most thrilled with, but angry, was when Luke Skywalker showed up in The Mandalorian. Because I love that scene. But the entire time I watched, I was like, how amazing would this have been in the theater opening night with Star Wars fans when you see that green blade ignite? Instead, 2 a.m. on an iPad, trying not to wake my wife who's asleep, is how I saw that scene. And I feel like Marvel especially did not do a good job of prioritizing what should have been a good big screen and what should have been small screen.
I think that is a very good point, especially when you put it that way. I would have loved seeing Anthony Mackie in that don that shield in theaters. That would have been really cool. Phenomenal. That would have been, especially when you put it that way. And yeah, I might have actually tried Eternals. I mean, because I didn't see it in theaters. The trailer did not appeal to me at all. But if it had been in bites, I might have actually tested the waters, I guess you could say, as a TV show. I might have actually given it a shot. But as it is, it's been years and I still haven't tried it, and I still have no regrets. It still has absolutely no appeal to me whatsoever.
You're not missing anything.
The weird thing was, like, after Tony and Steve were gone, like, the clear thing for me was like, okay, you should have replaced those two guys. You did something to replace Steve. One of the big breadcrumbs at the end of Endgame was the passing of the shield. And it was like, yeah, we're not doing a movie on that one. That's going to be a show. It just made no sense.
I think probably one of the other things that hurt Marvel, that things started around, was when Black Panther passed away.
For sure.
That shook up the whole universe, right?
That shook up the whole universe.
I did not even believe it for like 2 days. I'm like, no, that's internet nonsense.
Same. I had a full on weeping moment.
I was
when I read the news. I was in denial. So the whole question.
It really hurt them because they had lost Downey and Evans in the movies, and you had this perfect, charismatic actor
That
Sim
could have pulled everything
could have
forward.
been the guy to. I mean, that's the sad thing is Bozeman probably would have become the face of
He would
the.
have been the face of
Obviously, it
Marvel.
pales in comparison to the real life tragedy of him passing what we lost in the movie.
Absolutely. And I
But,
totally would have
man, what
followed.
the lost thing that was.
Absolutely would have followed him to the ends of the earth. He was a phenomenal actor, and he just nailed T'Challa. Absolutely perfect. You know, well, first of all,
It was
another
so
okay.
cool
Come to
to
think of
see
it,
him.
I retroactively say this. I think they should have brought T'Challa in much sooner than Captain America.
Civil War.
Civil War should have had him sooner. Especially now in retrospect when he's passed away. But he's such a good, strong character. We should have had him much sooner. Much sooner. I think he could.
If you go, I'm gonna go
Yeah.
to the stack.
Yeah.
Hold on, I'm gonna go to the stack.
No, I think the cool thing that movie did too, while Mike's grabbing the comic, for comic book fans like us, if you read him debuting in Fantastic Four,
Yes.
T'Challa in the comics for years, and there's Mike with the facsimile of it. Yeah.
I mean, this goes all the way back to the 60s.
Yeah.
Like he could have fit into Avengers much earlier.
Well, and it was so cool with that movie to see a character that it's not like he wasn't known comic book wise,
Awesome.
but for comic book fans, we knew how cool Black Panther was. So it was one
Absolutely.
of the first ones that Marvel hit where it was like, you showed the world at a very large scale how great this character that is a very small kind of fandom is. And that it's sad that it didn't happen earlier. And then of course it's, sad that it ended so soon. And now we're on to, Shuri, Shuri is a good character, but I don't think she's a good character for carrying a franchise.
I agree. I saw the movie and I love Chadwick. Absolutely loved him. And he just carried it on. And so when he passed away, I was a part of the camp that said don't replace him. Don't replace him. Write out his character or whatever. And hand it over to Shuri. I was absolutely in that camp. The movie came out and I suddenly switched sides. And I thought they should have, because I felt like they almost did a greater dishonor to his memory by the way they wrote him out. And the whole second movie, no shame on the actors, the actresses, any of them. They did their very best with what they had.
Yeah.
But that movie,
very trying circumstances given what happened.
Absolutely. But that movie should have been put on the back burner. I am sorry. It needed a T'Challa. It needed T'Challa. So I don't care how long they would have had to find somebody it would take years to replace Chadwick Boseman. Because a lot of people did point out, because I even read some articles at the time that also helped change my mind after the movie was they talked about all the previous actors in the Marvel canon who had already been replaced, including Bruce Banner, to name a few.
Yeah.
So why were they so afraid of replacing T'Challa? Because you need T'Challa in this. And again, I did not agree until I saw the movie, and then I absolutely agreed. It needed T'Challa. So I mean, rest in peace, Chadwick. But I don't think it did anything good for his. I don't think it did any good for his memory.
Well, it became a movie that's like it might have just been better had they not made the movie.
Yeah.
I think I would have rather just had that maybe he retired, or you could just write that Wakanda kind of became isolated again or something. Because what's weird with Chadwick that you point out, William Hurt played Thunderbolt Ross in a couple movies. He passed away. They're just immediately replacing him with Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
That's an easier character because obviously Thunderbolt Ross is not the cultural icon.
But Bruce Banner.
Yeah, they replaced Bruce. They replaced Rhodey right after their first movie.
Rhodey's a very important character. I mean, he might be a side character, but he's a very important side character who is getting stronger with each time. Except I don't know what we want to talk about with Secret Wars. No, not.
I think two things are happening here. Number one, I think Marvel is suffering from capturing lightning in a bottle with the whole Avengers run. How it was amazing how they started with Iron Man and then they brought the Avengers together. So I think you know, everybody, including DC, probably thought, oh, we could just keep this going, but no, maybe not. And the other thing with Black Panther, you know, they caught lightning in a bottle with Chadwick Boseman, and you know, and he could have taken the Marvel universe, like he could have been the new Tony Stark and started a whole new thing, but then he passed away. So it's like, you know, it's kind of like a ship without a rudder right now.
It is.
I think the other thing for Marvel that I would point to that I think is a problem, we've seen this with other genres, and I think me and you have talked about this before, Mike. Westerns had their 20-year gap where they were the dominant movie.
Yeah.
Noir movies had their 20-year gap. Epic, like Ben-Hur, the 10 Commandments.
Yes.
Their gap, right? We may just be running naturally into the end of the superhero portion of it, where we'll still get them, kind of like Westerns. We still get a Western every couple years that pops up. We still get an epic that pops up. But we also may just be running into that point where it's like society's kind of moved past it. You know, I mean, we'll always get Spider-Man. We'll always get Batman. Superman will probably get a movie every once in a while.
Yeah.
I think the thing is for me with Marvel that they really bumbled. At the time, I think when they needed to most fortify themselves around the characters that worked, they decided to start taking risks with the movies.
Right.
It's like you lost Tony Stark, you lost Steve Rogers, tragically you lost T'Challa. You got to circle the wagons and bring your strengths together. This is not the time to experiment with Shang-Chi and the Eternals and the Marvels. It's kind of like a football team. If you lose your starting quarterback, you don't bench your starting running back and go with a weird offense with a third string running back because that kind of feels like what Marvel did. It's like our stars. Let's go ahead and just bring fans out of the stands and have play instead. And it's like the movies that I feel like they should have led with right after Endgame. Give us a movie of Rhodey stepping into the Iron Man mantle. That's a comic run that people liked. It would have dealt with what's the legacy of Tony Stark. You could have easily had like Stane's family come in and try to steal Stark Industries off that whole Armor Wars run that was brilliant in the comics. And it would have given us a character that we loved, right? The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. I think the Disney Plus series was a great idea. But you could have very easily on the big screen could have had where maybe the government comes in and takes the shield from Sam and says, this is ours. Hands it to U.S. agent. He becomes corrupted. And the movie is about why Sam is the worthy legacy guy.
Yeah.
Instead, we got a Black Widow prequel about a dead character, which I love Black Widow. She should have got a movie 10 years ago.
I agree.
She died. It just feels like they made some really weird moves. And it reminded me so much of like if you were watching a sports team and their starting quarterback retired and all of a sudden they're like, let's just put backups in at every position. And it's like, that's the time they should have fortified your strengths that you have instead of experimenting. And it really seems to have kind of bit them in the butt.
Yeah, because those are costly experiments. But also, you know, it goes right back to what Lauren said at the beginning, which was like, you know, stay true to the main characters. And like what we always say, Reed, you can't go wrong if you stay true to the source material.
No, I think that's another excellent point, kind of to wrap everything that we have here. One of the things I have noticed too, a lot of Marvel's early movies based on comic book runs. What's interesting is comics is such a great medium for movies because you basically have 60 years of free market research about what stories work and what don't.
Yes.
And you look at the ones that have bombed. Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, one of the worst movies I've ever seen in theater. Based on a movie with Ant-Man versus Kang in the quantum realm with MODOK. There is not a comic that exists with that. Those characters are not put in that way.
Why?
Oh, when I heard MODOK was being made live action, I was like, why? No, there is no. I mean, MODOK works in comics. In a few cartoons. And in cartoons, especially like the 90s cartoons, you know, that I grew up on. Absolutely works. Live action, no. Maybe make him a program or something, change him up a bit. That is one of those things where you do have to change up the format. I mean, but when he came on live action and made him just an absolute idiot, making all these crass jokes and
it was one of the worst.
Terrible.
If it was in a movie.
Oh, and the CGI, it was so painful. I did not need a tiny CGI butt on a giant head. That was just, there was no need for that.
Well, it just seems like they decided we're gonna go even like the Eternals.
Yeah.
I've read some Eternal stuff. Anything Jack Kirby, I've tried to get my hands on. They did Kirby, and it's like, let's make all these characters unrecognizable. We're gonna go our own direction with all of them. We're gonna turn the main hero into a bad guy. And then you're shocked that like hardcore fans didn't love it and the plot didn't work. And it's like, well, because you made up your own plot. When this is an obscure brand anyway, you tick off anybody who's actually a fan of this brand, and then you make a movie that's kind of boring. It seems like they got away from the comics a lot too, and I think that's hurt them.
And seriously, and how can you mess up with Ant-Man and Paul Rudd?
Yeah.
And I still can't get over that Kang the Conqueror. Kang the Conqueror was defeated by ants. Defeated by ants. Not even Ant-Man, ants.
Ants. Evolved ants. Okay, evolved ants.
Still, he's Doctor Doom or descendant of Doctor Doom. He's everywhere. He conquered time and space. He is one of the greatest villains of all time, and he was defeated by ants in the quantum realm.
Thanos level bad guy, and you open him up by having him lose. Even if you had Ant-Man beat him,
yes,
your new Thanos loses to Ant-Man in a movie. Like,
no, what a choice!
Just a very weird decision they've made.
It was a very weird decision.
We'll kind of leave it there. I think if we got time, maybe we'll do another video about what we hope they'll do with the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, and what we're hoping they save Marvel. But Lauren, thank you for joining us. We'll have you on some more of these as always.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everybody.